and welcome to Progressive West Texas, the show where we talk to leaders trying to make positive change in our community. I am Cannon Roberts, your host, also known as West Texas Progressive on TikTok and Instagram. And it has been an exhausting week, which is a good thing. We started early voting here in Texas for municipal campaigns, as well as there's 2 constitutional amendments on the ballot. I have discovered from TikTok that one, I don't think everybody knows that Texas has a constitution, which is important to know. Texas does have a constitution, and we amend it constantly. I looked it up before the show, and our Texas Constitution has 507 amendments, and so there are 2 amendment measures on the ballot, along with all the municipal races happening right now. And so we have gone through a week of early voting. And it's exhausting, and that's a good thing, because if you are an organizer, if you're out doing this kind of activism, this political activism, you should be exhausted during early voting. That means that you are doing as much as you can. And so I think that comes across in the conversation we have today. I think you can tell that these candidates they're tired. And so today, I asked some of the candidates that we've talked to in the past to come back on. So we have Bethany Luna, who's running for Lubbock ISD School Board District 4, make sure I get that right. She was my first guest, and so it's been about a month and a half since she's been on. I said, look, a lot of it has changed. Why don't you come back? Then we have Angelina Mojica, who's also running for Lubbock ISD School Board and on the at-large position, and then Adam Hernandez, who's running for Lubbock Mayor. And so you've heard from all of them in the past, but now they all come on and they talk together. And I think we have a really good conversation that really focuses on Lubbock as a community. And so one of the reasons I wanted to bring them on was not just because they're exhausted and I wanted to tire them out more, but because the last couple of weeks have changed things. Like there has been a shift in there's been a shift in the language. There's been a shift in the campaigning approaches from their opponents. And so while we kind of saw this progress of at first their opponents ignored them, and that's what I was guessing was happening. I was like, they're going to ignore you, and so they ignored them. Then they tried to dismiss them, and that didn't work. And then they copied their tactics, and that really didn't work. And so now they're on the attack, and the incumbents and a lot of the people that are running right now here in Lubbock. All they have is fear. That is the only thing they have left, is to make voters afraid of these candidates. And there's no reason, there's no reason to be scared of them. You will see I make a joke about how Bethany and her partner spend a lot of times playing board games, and we've had long discussions about all the board games they played. That is not someone you need to fear. That is someone who can relate to these kids and who should be a leader. But there have been podcasts, there have been radio shows, and then there have been other political action committees that have just popped up here recently that have really started going on the attack, and they're trying to define who they are, and they're trying to make sure that people are scared of these candidates. And when that's what a candidate turns to, when someone has to focus on that fear, that means they have nothing left. They have no substance. They have no foundation. They think they should win their election because they deserve it, not because they've earned it, not because they would be the best person in that position. And I think you're seeing a lot of that, not just from the candidates themselves, but from the kind of the communication, the media infrastructure surrounding them, people who are supporting them on their team, radio hosts that lean that way. They also don't have that substance. And so they have to focus on these attacks. And so I asked them all to come in. They've been, and the attacks are very different. Adam always gets asked, what side are you on? Who are you running for? And the thing is, when someone asks that, you know that they're conservative. You know that they're at the very least Republican and probably like fairly far right conservative. Nobody else asked that. And I was talking to Adam today this afternoon, and 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 we think that conservatives who ask that question think everybody asks that. So I that when they walk up and they say, who are you with? What side are you on? What party are you with? They think that Democrats or liberals or progressives ask the exact same thing. They don't. They don't. When someone comes up to Adam and asks what side he's on, what party he's with, he immediately knows they're conservative and they're pretty, they're fairly far right conservative. They're not going to be that moderate conservative. And so that has been happening a lot, and so those, them trying to put them into categories and into groups. Angelina was asked on a radio show about abortion, and she mentions this very briefly, but she's running for school board. Like, what? She can't do anything about that. And then, of course, because Bethany is not hiding the fact that she's a queer woman, there are lots of very typical attacks on her, for that reason, largely coming from a podcast host who thinks he has influence here in Lubbock, even though he does not live in this area anymore. So that's always fun when they have to keep their claws here in Lubbock, even though they have moved on and gone somewhere else. And so the other thing that I wanted to explain a little bit that you're going to hear us talk about is Lubbock being the largest sanctuary city for the unborn. I should put that in quotes, largest sanctuary city for the unborn. In last year, so this was 2019, a couple of months before Texas passed SB1, right? It was SB1, passed the abortion ban. Lubbock passed its own abortion ban. And so here in Lubbock, it was a lot of the same things that the state had, except it actually didn't go as far as what the state did. And so Lubbock got really excited about that. They passed that. I shouldn't say Lubbock because all of our city leaders voted against it. It was first put to the school board, or it was first put to the city council, and they voted against it, and it was never meant to go through. What that was a political street fight, and our state senator wanted to make sure that our mayor wasn't going to be able to oppose him, and just wanted to give him a black eye. And so he kind of organized this group and put it up for a vote. He did his damage, and then he was good. But then one of our state house representatives, he thought he was going to be in a pretty he thought he was going to get a lot of attention in his race, and his Democratic opponent did very well in her primary, and was out and was part of the community. And then once she won the primary, we didn't hear from her that much, and so he kind of felt left out, and he was like, I'm not getting enough attention, I got to do something. And so they kind of, the state house representative and the state senator kind of got together, and they revived it and put it to the people, and it was supported. Not in numbers that would suggest a majority of the city supports it, and numbers that would suggest two large churches who don't really care about life. They care about being right. They care about making sure that they're better than you. They got their people to support that, and so we talk about that some. Now, the interesting thing about that is Adam's going to mention that some of the mayoral candidates are still talking about that, but it's done. It's over, because the state law actually, like I said, it supersedes what Lubbock did. It supersedes that ordinance, and so the ordinance doesn't really have any value because of the state law. But if it is overturned, which I understand most people don't think it's going to be, but if it is overturned, then that will overturn the ordinance as well. So whatever happens at the Supreme Court for this Texas state law, it makes our city ordinance irrelevant. But either way, and for some reason, mayoral candidates are still fighting about that, and they're still talking about that. So what happened the last couple of weeks is just, we saw a lot of this negativity come out. We saw a lot of these attacks. And talking to all the candidates, I knew that they were, they were frustrated. They were, annoyed by this. And so I said, well, let's let's come on and let's talk and let's have you define yourself. And so that's what they're going to do. They're going to kind of tell you what's being said about them, and they're going to tell you what the reality of it is. And I think it's a really good conversation, and I wish we gave candidates more of an opportunity to talk like this, to show themselves as people, as humans, as leaders, and not simply as a school board candidate where they feel like they need to show a very narrow version of themselves. I think we need to see people holistically. I think there are reasons we don't see many candidates holistically. I think a lot of them worry that if you do see them that way, then then you're not going to like them very much. But the more you learn about the candidates, these three candidates that I talked to, the more you hear their stories, the more you hear the stories they tell, the more you're going to like them. And so that's I wanted to have this give them this opportunity, before we finished up voting, and let them talk. And so I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. So let's go talk to the candidates. How is everybody? Are we? It's the election is a week away. So are we tired? Are we staying in there?
Tired.
Yeah, hanging in there. Tired, a little bit.
Good. I mean, I think everybody should be tired. Like if you weren't tired, probably means there was more you could do. And so I think that's a good feeling right now. So I'm glad everybody's doing well, and you're sticking in there. And we got one more week. We have another day of early voting. So tomorrow everybody can vote from 8 to 8, and then May 7th, that's election day. So if you are watching and you haven't gone out and voted yet, please go and vote. We really need your support. So I want to talk about the attacks. The attacks have started. And honestly, and I think I've told y'all all this personally, but I don't know that the attacks are a bad thing. Like I know they can be frustrating. I know they can be infuriating. But I like the last two campaigns I worked on with Miguel and Tom, we didn't get those attacks because we were not scaring anybody enough for them to attack us. And so while they are frustrating, I do think there is some amount of positivity there that like it means you're making a difference. It means you're connecting with people because now all they have is fear, so they have to make people afraid of y'all. And so thinking about that, I know that y'all have all been to forums, you've been doing interviews, and you've all kind of been labeled as in one way or another. That's not exactly true. So I want to give y'all the opportunity to define yourselves and let people know who you are rather than, hearing it from other podcasters or radios or even the other candidates that y'all are running against. And so, Bethany, you were on first. You were on my very first show, and I really appreciated you being on. But that also means it's been the longest for you. It's been over about a month and a half since you've been on. So let's start by like what is the biggest misperception? Like, what do you feel like is kind of being put on you? And what's the reality of it? Like, what is the biggest issue?
Yeah, it's kind of twofold. The first thing that gets put on me a lot is that I'm some kind of groomer or a pedophile, or I have some gay agenda, which I'm not even quite sure what that means. I don't know. I guess there's some kind of fear that I'm going to make all the kids in Lubbock gay. I don't know. There's been like lies and rumors spread about me supporting gang activity, pornography in schools, like just all kinds of chaos. Like that's crazy. Like my job is helping kids when they have been exposed to inappropriate material too early and supporting them in how to do that differently. And so my real agenda, and I tried to make a statement with this at the last forum, and I wore a shirt that said PSA, my agenda is to protect all kids. And I made that a rainbow and then also had like a black and a brown part and put the actual numbers of our kids per a bunch of different categories on that shirt. And really, because there is a difference between saying I want to protect all kids and then actually wanting to protect all of our kids and being willing to show up in action with that. And so for me, the biggest misconception is that somehow my identity makes me unworthy or less than. Um, yeah, I'm queer, and that is not everything that I am, like I am a therapist, I'm a mom, I'm a human. There are all other kinds of identities and parts of me. So it's sometimes kind of annoying to be kind of singled down into, oh, well, she's a queer person, so we must keep her out. I just want to help kids, and behaviors are crazy right now. The number of suicide attempts and the suicide rates are astronomically high. And the self-harm and so many other things in our schools right now, and the bullying right now is scary. So I mean, the reality is I just want to help our kids, and I have a different skill set than the current board. To I don't have to go and get educated in neurobiology and neuroscience. Like, I have a good framework, not because I've been gone to school for those things, but I've done a lot of training by people who have. And so I can come in and, as the incumbents would often say, I can jump in and get started. Well, I can jump in and get started on mental health, man. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have to learn anything.
So if your identity as a queer woman is not the main thing that you're going to bring to office, which is obviously what the other side wants people to believe,
Yeah.
what do you see? What do you feel like the reality? What is the biggest thing that you're going to bring to office that's going to help this community?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to bring a different framework. Like, I spent 2 years, 60 hours, and so many out, like 60 credit hours, and so many hours of supervision, learning about systems, learning about, microaggressions, and all of these other things that contribute to bullying. I've had almost 400 hours of trauma training, and I have training in all of these different modalities that are geared towards helping our kids in struggle, and, helping children who are bullies, helping children who have been bullied. And so what I bring is an ability to give knowledge that may not be present now, so that we can get in and create some policy and some practices around how to manage these behaviors in schools.
Okay, I like that. So,
Yeah.
do you think it would be helpful if more, whether it's school leaders or the people making these decisions, because like we have staff who are trained in this type of thing,
Mhm.
that you're talking about, this type of trauma, like trauma therapy and helping people work through this, but the school board doesn't necessarily have that type of training or that background. So
Sure.
how is that going to affect the decisions that you make when you're on the school board?
Yeah, to me, it's obviously every decision can't be made from a behavioral standpoint. There are finances and things that either will make it possible or make it impossible. But I think the biggest thing is, right now, if you don't know something, you don't know it. So if there's no one on the board who has a behavioral background, they are dependent on other people to come and present to them and give them information. And while it's good to get feedback from outside sources, it makes the process watered down and take longer. I've had the training in EMDR and TFCBT and TBRI and conscious discipline and positive behavioral intervention supports. Like, that's a ridiculous amount of acronyms. I apologize. But
I was just going with it. I was like, yep, we're all gonna
the
smile and
point of that
nod.
is, like that is the amount of specialty that I bring to
Mhm.
this board. And that matters because I don't have to go learn how to do it. I can explain to you why it matters, because I have a good foundation and a background and so much more education than I'd like to even think about. And being able to explain why it's relevant and how it can impact our schools.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, Angelina, what about you? You were the second episode, and so I'm sure, just like Bethany, a lot of things have changed. So what do you feel like is the biggest misperception that people are promoting about you, and what's the reality?
So I mean, much like Bethany, I've just kind of been lumped into this idea of who we are,
Mm-hmm.
because we are supporting one another in our campaign efforts. And I believe that Bethany has a lot to offer, as much as I do, and as much as Adam can do too. We bring just a different experience and a different perspective. And that's one misconception that has been noted, is the lack of experience. But I question that, because I'm like, well, what kind of experience is needed to be on a school board? I mean, if you're engaging daily and actively with children, teachers, and parents, then isn't that experience? Isn't that the type of experience you would want? And like Bethany, I've had several hours. I mean, I don't really talk about my education because nobody tends to hear it anyways. you know, I have a master's in human services, and I'm close to having another master's as a mental health clinician. So on top of that, not only that, I've been actively in the community of working and advocating for vulnerable children and families through foster care system and all those things. So I come with a, TBRI, which is trust-based relational intervention experience, and all the other things that come along with that. So I am very trauma aware, and that perspective allows me to be open-minded when connecting with the community. And that is important. I will say, when we sat in the school board meeting just last week, there was a mother who stepped up and was talking about a child being bullied. And I really could relate with that, because I recalled a situation where my son was interrogated by a school librarian and whomever else was there. I was never notified, because they assumed that he had done some graffiti in a library book, only to find out it wasn't even him, but the other person, the other child that had checked the book out.
Mm-hmm.
My son, when I picked him up, was just terrified. And so, that needs to stop, and people need to communicate with parents before those things happen. It's not okay to just do things and then not make your parents aware of what's going on. I mean, the safety of children in the schools is what my quote unquote agenda is.
Right.
Mental health, and that's the thing here is, I understand a business needs to be run, but it has to be balanced with compassion. It has to be balanced with the understanding that you are not serving your purpose as far as my own personal beliefs, goals, and morals. You can have those, but you have to be able to love people where they're at. And that, we're thrown that we're not Christian minded and whatever. And I'm very spiritually, in my walk with in my faith and things like that. I don't display it, because I do it through the actions that I give, because when we talk about Christ and we talk about religion, that's all actions. You do it through the love that you give. And that's all I have. So I'm not going to sit there and condone somebody for something that they're struggling with or not struggling with. That's not my priority.
Yeah.
My priority, and when it comes to religious beliefs, is me. And what I'm going to do with that is show people that I care about them, show people that I love them, and help children in the school systems thrive. That's what we need to do. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I tend to stay away from all the negative stuff. I don't really know what's circulating out there. It doesn't serve me purpose. It's not going to be productive to my campaign. And I usually have that mindset where focus goes, energy flows, and I'm not giving it any energy. It doesn't for me. Mm-hmm.
No, I really appreciate that. And I do, like, something I say quite a bit is the fact that, Jesus says they'll know you by your love, not they'll know you by the things you don't do. And like, that definitely is the religious community in Lubbock, like, even the one I grew up with, even in my household, like that's kind of the mantra, is like, well, we show who we are by all the stuff we don't do, by the people we don't help. And that's it's not really the way it's supposed to go. And so I do feel like that leadership is needed, and I don't think we see that on our current school board. And it is interesting that like lack of experience is what they come at you with, because like how does being a lawyer help you run a school district? Like how does anything except having experience in education, and none of our school board members do. None of them have a background in education. They're, lawyers, and I think one an insurance agent maybe, and developers and stuff. And so that is very interesting that like y'all are getting that complaint, while they when and one of them was appointed. Well, a couple of them have been appointed, but they get appointed, and no one's like, "Well, wait a second, what kind of experience do they have in education?" It's like, well, we're friends with them, so let's appoint them. So, Angelina, what do you think? How do you think you can affect and change the school district by putting mental health as a priority? Because I'm hearing a lot about that. I don't think we see that a lot in our current school board. They seem to be somewhat dismissive of that idea that the school needs to help with that, mental health care. I think some of that comes from the privilege of most of the people on the school board, that if they have mental health needs, they have the money, they can go and pay for them. And most people in our community don't necessarily have those resources. So how do you think that what does that bring? How is that going to improve the school system of having two people who put mental health as a priority, who bring that to the position?
Well, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that bottom need is that stability, physical, mental, and emotional. When that can be met, then you're going to see students thrive, you're going to see teachers thrive, and you're going to see our public school system thrive. Because you need to meet that bottom level before you can even start leveling up to self-actualization. And so that's why it's important, because it's such an issue right now. I mean, suicide and behaviors and, other things that have been disclosed to us in our meet and greets. It is so important to meet those levels before we can even talk about like testing, before we can talk about the business aspects of running a school system. Let's address the foundation. Let's address what is broken right now, because if you build on a foundation that is cracked or unsturdy, everything else is going to tumble down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to piggyback on that, I recently had a worker from YWCA reach out to me, and students are actively asking for mental health resources. So not only is it like just this is what we believe needs to happen, students currently in our school district are requesting mental health support, and they are stating we need it in schools because there's no way I can get there after hours. I can't get there. My mom won't take me. I don't have access. Like we won't have gas. So I think that is a huge thing that maybe everyone else in the world doesn't know. I know Adam knows because he's been talking to 7th and 8th graders right now, but our students are craving mental health support, and our current board is not set up and does not have the training. And that's why I think like Angelina and myself offer some really great opportunities.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think gets overlooked a lot by educators is the fact that when you have that suicide attempt or that suicide, it affects the whole school, the entire class. I was teaching dual credit at Estacado here in town. This was 10, 12 years ago, and one of the dual credit students, and this was a fairly small class, I think like maybe 12, 14 students, because it was dual credit. And so I was going in as the representative from the university to go and teach them. And on a school trip, one of the students in that class committed suicide, and it took weeks to get that class back on track. And so because of the nature of the class, because it was small, because it was the AP, this group kind of traveled, in a clump. And so he had, you know, 2 or 3 really good friends that really struggled, but the whole class was affected. And so I think, you know, I think a lot of times attempts get dismissed as, you know, well, it didn't happen, so it's okay. Or if, you know, if someone does commit suicide, it's like, well, it's them and their family. But it has ripple effects that are really problematic. And so that was, you know, 11 years teaching. Fortunately, that was the only time that happened. But it was tough to bring that around. So on that very uplifting note, Adam, so you've been in this the longest. You are, I think you're kind of a lot of people's focal point right now. So how do you feel like you're being, you know, represented, and what is the reality of the situation?
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to. And so there, for the most part, the feedback has been really great. I think that we try to put as much out about me as possible on the campaign page. I try to share as much as possible on my personal page just to let people know what I'm dealing with, what I'm doing, so that they can keep up and make their own assessment of what's going on. There's photo and video evidence to go along with that.
Sure.
So, you know, we're not shy about who I am. I never really have been, and I'm very confident in who I am. So most folks, I think, just perceive what I'm doing as what it is. But you have a couple of radio hosts that are more on the, I would guess would be called on the farther right part of the political spectrum. And obviously those folks are going to go for a different candidate than myself. I mean, that's regardless of anything I do or don't do. That's just going to be the case with those guys and their and much of their audience. And so if you talk to those folks who tend to be classified as further right, I think that because of the relationship that I have with many folks in the Republican Party, and there's mutual respect between many of us at this point, I think that confuses those folks that are further to the right, and so they don't really have a target that they can hit, but they want a target. They want an enemy. They want me to be the other, the opposite of what they are, right? And I'm just not. I'm an independent candidate. I say it till I'm blue in the face. It just is what it is. Before I got involved in all this stuff in the summer of 2020, I was 39 years old and had never registered to vote in my life. Didn't even know who our mayor was until the day before I met him. I had to Google him. This is how checked out I was. So if anybody wants to try to label me as having some sort of political background and like all of this kind of stuff, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just not the facts. And so it just is what it is. So that being the case, I'm a really simple guy. You just got to make your position make sense to me. If it doesn't make sense to me or I don't agree with it, then that's just what it is. And I'll disagree when I disagree with you. Now, that may line up with who folks consider the left at times. It may line up with who folks consider the right at times. I don't really care about that, honestly. It's just I'll have my own stance on the issue on an issue by issue basis. And so I don't think that folks in this area all of the people who are mostly politically engaged on a continuous basis, they're used to it being them and the other, right? There is no in between. Mm-hmm. And they're not used to somebody just fully and completely having their own train of thought that's clear of any sort of political leaning or bias. You know, they're not used to it. And so I think that that's just the reaction, is that they want to make me that, so that they'll take any opportunity, any sort of small piece of evidence that they think illustrates this point that I'm a radical leftist, for instance. Or we've heard terms like labeled me as well, again, depends on who you talk to. Some people swear I'm a conservative. Some people swear I'm a liberal. Some people say I'm a radical leftist. I've been called an Obama type organizer. whatever that means, but okay. There's all these different labels that have been put on me, and I think it's just because, again, they need that enemy and they want their guy to win, and I get it. But the real perception is that I'm independent in thought and action. But at the end of the day, the thing that I've really been trying to get across to all of these folks is, and I went back on one of those radio programs and told them just this: regardless of my personal stance on any issue at any time, democracy is going to win the day. And that's just it. If the majority of the people of this city come in there and say, this is what we would like to do, then that's what we're doing. So that's the reality of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have heard you many times talk in depth about like tax policy. Last time you were on the show, you got excited about garbage collection, which I really, really appreciated. And so I mean, obviously, like, you're going to be somewhat of a biased, response to this. But one, do you feel like the other mayoral candidates have that type of grasp of policy? And two, why do you feel like it's important? Because, they're, again, it's all about kind of tribalism. Like, are you part of our tribe? You're saying, no, I'm independent. And so they're saying, well, then you must be part of that tribe. Right. So why is it important to focus on policy? And do you think any of the other candidates are doing that?
Yeah, well, it's important to focus on the policy because that's the job. I mean, that's literally the job. We make the policy for the city. And so to me, there's a very specific process that should be undertaken to do that. And the reason that Lubbock Compact even exists, or why I even got into advocacy even happened, is because that wasn't there. The process is actually there. It just wasn't really playing out how it should. And so the other reason why it's important to be involved and to understand how the city works is a lot of these times, over and over and over, we get a city council in there who does not do that. So a lot of folks like to talk about experience, but we've had nothing but inexperienced people on our council, and you can go through the history and check that. And so they get on there, usually with the backing of some wealthy folks in town, and there's, speaking of agendas, there's generally agendas about different things, and anything that falls outside of those agendas, depending on who the group is, just doesn't even get worried about. For instance, solid waste, for instance. Right. And there's some real issues there. And that's why I get excited about it, because these issues have been so long standing, because you just have people that don't understand how the city operates and aren't really even worried about it. They just are worried about, how do I move the levers I need to move for the folks I need to move them for, so that they're not mad at me and tell everybody I'm a radical leftist. Right. So, that's why it's important. And so the real clear difference, not just from me, but from all of the feedback that we get at forums, and as we're hearing people talk out on the street and all of that, I'll let them tell you. And in their words, they say I'm clearly the one that's the most knowledgeable about the city. So where that comes from is, I've been doing this work on a weekly basis, literally, for the past 2.5 years. So I don't know about y'all, but I'm pretty sure most people who have been at a job for 2.5 years are going to be okay at it. And so I've been doing it. And those other guys, no dig to them, haven't. They have their own lives. They're doing their own things. I know that I believe all of those guys serve their community in some way or another, whether that be just like working within the church or working with other boards or whatever you have. But they just have not been doing the business of the city. And I have, because it was a critical part of my advocacy work.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good response and a really good answer. I think, and the other side of it too is that I think we have been in a place where, like you were saying, people talk to their rich friends, they get the money, and we're getting a lot of that feedback of like, we're hearing a lot of like, oh, this person's going to win, this person doesn't have a chance, and they're just going based on who has the most money. But I think there can be a big difference when you actually show up and do things for the people you're representing, and like it's almost like none of the candidates that we are that y'all are running against have even thought of that. They're like, oh, if we do things that make people happy, and improve the city. So do you feel, and this can go to anyone, do y'all feel that your opponents have kind of changed maybe their strategy a little bit because of the way that y'all have been working together?
Well, I can say on my part, and I'll let Angelina and Bethany answer to the school board side of it, because the short answer is yes on all accounts. But as far as the mayoral race, is pretty simple. Theirs is a little more in depth, so I'll go first. Basically, the language all of those guys was using at the beginning of all of this was one thing. And what we started to see is that as I would get questions, sometimes I would mention new things, right? Because if somebody asks about something, I'm going to speak to you from what I know about it, or what I've heard, or what I've seen. Again, dealing with city council and all these different boards on a weekly basis. And so from time to time, new topics may pop into the lexicon, right? And so that's what was going on. Things like the Unified Development Code or Plan Lubbock 2040, and these are things that I've been dealing with, obviously, on a very intimate basis for a really long time. And so they come up. And so as we were using those terms, then we would see in forums after that, then they would start using these terms. And then when they started to realize that how I talk about building coalitions and collaborations and working together with people, which is literally what I've been doing for the past 2.5 years in real life, and so I'm just speaking what I'm doing, they began to adopt that language. One of the candidates began to call himself an advocate when he was describing a job that he had. And so I don't, when I say advocate, that means something different.
Yeah.
Like, nobody pays me for the 50 or 60 plus hours a week that I put in on community work.
Yeah.
That's outside of my business. That's also keeps me busy. So, that's not what I mean when I say advocate. It's not, I'm not referring to a job where I had a salary and the person who I'm saying I'm advocating for was my boss. That's not what I mean. And so you had stuff like that. And then one of the candidates, as a matter of fact, so again, not something I gave myself, one of the citizens of East Lubbock gave me the nickname the People's Mayor, which is why I put it on my door hangers. Well, one of the candidates went even so far to say, I want to be the People's Mayor. Right. So all of this language adoption is kind of the biggest change I've seen, but it's what has happened is it breaks down really quickly under any type of scrutiny. If you ask like question number 2, like, it starts to fall apart because they don't really have the substance behind it. They're just taking that surface level, what they heard me say. And so that's the biggest change in mine. Now, as the school board, again, a little more involved. I'll let the ladies tell you all about that.
Angelina, how do you feel?
Well, seeing how I've only been in 2 situations or 2 forums where I've actually had to address questions and answers with the incumbent that I'm running against, I don't see much of a strategy change in regards to, she just really cleaves to the experience perspective of, there has to be a right experience in order to do this job efficiently. And so outside of that, but there is another candidate also running. So there's 3 of us running for the at-large position. And I have seen verbiage changed in statements because, and we study and we research a lot of the questions that could possibly be asked of us. And when we do receive information from the meet and greets, we go back and we research those things. And so when we present that information, it's up for grabs. And so there is people that will take that information and then they start utilizing it moving forward in other forums and things like that. So, I mean, Okay. I mean, if that's
Yeah.
what you want to do, but it just shows the work again. And you know, I don't worry about it. I don't really worry about having to justify who I am, because much like Adam, I'm confident in who I am. And I work with a lot of people in the community, and so much so that they reach out and they're like, you know, there was no choice to be made. You have my vote. And so, I mean, I rest assured in that. So it's not, you know, if they need to use the information that we give, you heard it here first, and that's, I mean, that's the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Bethany?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, even like, you know, we were talking about meeting with teachers since February, and then, you know, late April, there's a meet and greet with the incumbents all together. And it's like, dude, you've been in office for 4 years. Why are you doing a meet and greet now? You know,
Right.
where you been? So definitely changes. I've had the pleasure of sitting with the candidates in all of the forums that have been scheduled so far. And there has been some pretty stark language changes. And, you know, they'll adopt language from someone other than Angelina sometimes. So I've heard my words be used. I've talked about providing affirming support. And then yesterday, someone sent me, you know, a thing, and it was like, I want to provide positive, affirming, you know, support to our students and our teachers. And I'm like, do you even know what the word affirming means? Get out of my face right now. Are you serious? You know, and so there very much has felt, at least to me, an adoption. And you know, one thing I will say that I have really appreciated is I really appreciate the incumbent that I'm running against, his integrity. Like, even though a lot of people around him have come after me and said some not so nice things, he could have jumped on that bandwagon at any time, and he's been super respectful. And honestly, I didn't know if he would be, and so he very much has my respect for the way that he's handled himself through this race, because he could have done what others are doing. And it would have been very easy where we live to just attack my queerness and make that the only conversation. And he hasn't done that. He's made it about, you know, his partner being a teacher, and his finance background. And so I have appreciated that. And he hasn't changed a whole lot, but other people that I'm not running against, I hear language adaption, and I'm like, I said that.
Yeah.
Like a month ago, you know?
Well, and I really think, like, I really think y'all should see that as a success. Like, that is obviously not the success that y'all are going for. Like, you know, you want to win. We're hoping you win. But I do think changing that language, changing the argument, shifting the Overton window. And I think what we're seeing too is, like, because it happened fairly quickly. Like, I mean, within one campaign, like, all of these people are shifting. And so I think that's kind of surprising that it didn't take, you know, several runs. It within the campaign, they shifted and realized, oh, we have to talk about this stuff. So I think y'all should really be proud of yourselves for doing that and understanding that, like, this has not been done before. With the way that these shifted, you know, even when I was working on campaigns in 2018, and there were people running in, you know, in every county and federal and state race that we had, that group did not shift the window like y'all are doing. They did not change that language. So I think y'all should be very proud of yourselves for that alone. And I think that should give y'all hope too, that like things could really surprise, you know, some people. I think all of y'all will be like, we worked really hard for this, you know, and when you win your races. But at the same time, a lot of people are going to be surprised. But I think y'all should be really proud of how you do that. So, and one of the things that I'm hearing is that one of the ways the language is shifting is that the people in this area have been so used to running using moral arguments. And it doesn't matter if you don't agree with them religiously, they can get their way by kind of forcing this moral religious argument. And that shifting. One of the first conversations I had with Bethany was about getting away from that. And so Dr. Deva Woodley is a researcher that I really like. I've read a couple of her articles and her book. And her book, The Politics of Common Sense, it looks at the difference between the gay rights movement and the living wage movement. And the living wage movement hasn't gotten anywhere. We still have the same wage. And the gay marriage movement, we obviously have Oberfeld, and so we are like that has come. And so what she looks at is that the gay marriage was about civil rights. It was about, hey, we need to all be equal. Whereas that living wage kind of focused on, you need to do this because it's the right thing. And so what she looked at is said, that's not very effective. And so not to put you on the spot too much, Bethany, but do you feel like that has helped with this shift? The fact that you're focusing on the civil rights aspect of it. You're focusing on the fact that everybody deserves an education. And do you think that has helped get away from this like moral religious argumentation?
Yeah, I think only for the people who are not in the weeds. You know, like there has to be like an openness to have a civic conversation over a moral one. I think there's been a lot of progress for many people regarding civics, and that's a conversation that I want to be having, right? Like I want to be having a civic conversation, and a lot of the attacks that are coming at me are moral, and they're like, well, how dare you? You're immoral. Like sexual perversion was a word that was used to address people like me, you know, and like, you know, the LGBT culture and you're a groomer and like all of this. It's like trying to pull that morality card and like get us going off in the weeds where we can't see. And I'm like, no, I'm not talking to you about that. Like, let's get back into the things that matter. And the frustrating thing for me is when you're not in the weeds talking about morality, you're not talking about what actually matters right now for our kids. Mm-hmm. What matters right now for our kids is their social emotional well-being and connections and teachers who are not leaving the profession. That's what matters. And that's a civic conversation.
Yeah.
I think for the people who want to have that conversation or are willing to prioritize the actual needs, yeah, we 100% are doing that. And I think some of the incumbents are in that part of the conversation.
Yeah.
But a lot of these people are, I don't know where they off in the weeds. I'm like, shh, stop it. You're distracting everybody from what matters. Hush.
Yeah. So do you think they would expect that, you know, part of that LGBTQIA identity and culture is playing a large amount of board games with your partner? Like, is that what they mean? When So that was the first thing that I thought of. I was like, I don't think they know how much she stays at home and plays board games. So
I don't know, man. Like I'm really thinking about calling up Roger Pratt and being like, let me be on your show, man. Like if you're going to call me out, like actually talk to me, you know, let's have a civic minded conversation that actually talks about what matters rather than just, you know, random attacks at people because they don't like homophobic comments being made.
Yeah. And Adam, do you see that as part of the shift in like your race as well, of like moving away from some of the more moral arguments and just talking about like civil issues?
Yeah, I didn't really see too much of any sort of moral arguments. Honestly, when it comes to this race, outside of perhaps the sanctuary city issue,
that's what I was thinking.
You know, and that issue, we really haven't seen it. It's actually seems to be losing steam because it was done. I mean, it was done last year.
Right.
I mean, obviously, there's things locked up in the courts and all that, but for all intents and purposes, it's done. Right? That's a done deal. And you know, some folks were choosing to lean in on that still this year for their campaign, which was super confusing to me. But outside of that, kind of how Bethany was talking about, all I did the entire time, pretty actively, is bring the conversation down to the local level.
Yeah.
Because when folks, especially around here in a hyper-partisan area, when you start talking about state and especially federal level, then they go to all of the moral arguments, which you're never going to win. Nobody's going to win those, right? And so I was very actively and very purposefully bringing the conversation continuously to the local level about real issues in the city that I could control as mayor, and actively reminding people what position I'm running for and what I can and cannot control in that position. And when you do that, what I found is that there's no Republican or Democrat potholes, right? Like, everybody wants good parks, regardless of where they are or whatever their ideology is. All of these sort of things that a mayor can have some influence over, that's the stuff that pretty much across the board everybody can agree on. And so that's kind of what I did, because I didn't want it to get into that playing field at all, because it's just not constructive.
Yeah. Yeah. Angelina, have you seen any of that?
I definitely would agree. I mean, because they would ask you all kinds of questions. And I remember even getting interviewed and going, okay, how is abortion related to this being on the school board? And so it's having to redirect the conversation and going, again, I'm not representing myself, I'm representing the community, and always redirecting it back to love. Love is acceptance, and I accept all. So, that's what it is. And I want our schools to stop closing. I want our communities to thrive. And I want to make sure that we're doing anything and everything that we can do to enable a successful public school system.
Yeah. Yeah. So Angelina, I'll stick with you for this question too. What have you learned over the last couple of months of campaigning? Like, what have you changed your mind about? What have you found out that's been interesting? I know there's a learning curve. I know there's always surprises in campaigns. So what sticks out to you?
I think I just confirmed that I don't like politics. No, but stepping into this, what I've learned on a personal level is that I have had every skill and every strength within me to actually put myself out here and allow myself to be a target for whatever statements or whatever, and it not affect me. I sleep well at night. As a matter of fact, I pass out because I'm so exhausted running a campaign. I mean, I don't even think about it in the morning. And it's almost, you're going into situations that aren't set up for your success, but you navigate them well. And I think so much so that people they respect you at the end of it. They may not vote for you, but you earn a respect there at the end of it all. And there's been networking opportunities too, just networking and, being able to build relationships in the community. And I will say the person that Bethany is running up against, the incumbent, he has been the most respectful in the sense that he made it out of his way to come and shake our hands and have a conversation with us at the board meeting, where I've not received that from anybody else. And that tells me a lot, because that's like, if I'm just a community member, regardless of where we're at in the campaign, I'm still there. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to be there. I work in the community. You're going to see me again. We still need to have a working relationship. Yeah. And that just kind of tells you who your work, who's there already representing the community of Lubbock. And I shook the other candidate's hand, and I said, thank you so much for the opportunity to run against you. I've learned a lot. And, whatever the outcomes. And he was like, yeah, whatever the outcomes. And so it's that common sense of respect, and just knowing that at the end of the day, people are advocating for change. And here's the common denominator between all of us. We didn't ask for this opportunity. This opportunity sought us out. So the community is asking for change. The community is aware. And so just getting out there and voting can make that happen for those that really want it to happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I've even had some surprises. Like I tend to be, especially when I'm out, block walking and putting up door hangers, I tend to be stereotype people pretty quickly, and so like when I see the big truck and like I'm like, okay, I'm not sure about this house, and sometimes I'll pass by, and so I was doing that the other day, and there was a big truck, and he had a "Don't tread on me" sticker on it, and he was out on his porch smoking, and I was like, I should probably pass this one up, but then I saw that he had a STEM sign, he had like a I heart STEM, and I was like, okay, well, we're gonna see how this goes. And I think I was in all three. I was in an area where I was in all three of your districts, and I handed him all of your push cards, and he went, "Well, thank God, we got to get change here somehow." And I was like, "Okay, I need to quit being so judgmental and reach out." So I do think people are craving change in our area. So Bethany, what about you? What have you learned?
So there's a reason why people wait till they're older to do this, and their kids are older, man. My daughter all the time is like, "Mama, go away," because I haven't seen her for like 2 or 3 days. She goes to bed at 7. So I'm out running a campaign and she's asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think is a big thing is doing this at the point of my life where I am about 10 years younger almost than everyone else on the board, which I think is really good. I bring a different perspective and awareness because of my age. And I think that that's helpful, but I definitely have an understanding why people don't do it at this point in their life. It's very hard. It's been taxing. And I think the thing that I'm really grateful for is I have spent the past 10 years of my life really focusing on serving individuals one-on-one. And I now see like an ability of how to serve in such a greater capacity. And through like phone calls and meeting people and all of that, I've learned some ways that I can help on a grander scale.
Mm-hmm.
I've had, like I mentioned earlier, people at the YWCA reach out for their youth. I have people asking me to provide mental health supports and all of these other avenues. And, PFLAG and I had a conversation about maybe reinvigorated that. Proximity of West Texas is running an inclusive prom. And I was actually able, within a couple of hours of finding out that they needed a DJ, get them a DJ and an MC, like from the connections that I've built throughout this campaign. And so it's been really fun, that part of it. I think I've also learned that I'm really lucky that I came out when I did and managed it how I did. So I was the only openly gay kid pretty much in my entire school. And I just decided that no one was going to use that to have power over me. And that's been really helpful in this race. So while I haven't enjoyed all of the experiences and some of the things that people say are just outlandish, like they definitely have not hurt me and my mental health, like they're just repeating things I've been hearing since I was 16 years old. Come on, buddy, let's go. And so I'm very grateful for some of the early experiences I had when I came out, because they really did help protect me. And I get so many messages from previous students or parents or current students who just say thank you. And so representation matters even more than I could have imagined.
Yeah. And so Adam, I was going to bring this up earlier, and then I got sidetracked. And then when Bethany said representation, it reminded me of this. So before you answer the question of what you learned, you had a unique experience yesterday where someone was excited. You represented them in a way that's different than what we usually talk about when we talk about representation. So can you tell that story?
Yeah, so we were in a parking lot and getting ready to see off some volunteers that were block walking. And in the shopping center we were at, there was an AA. I don't know what you call this. The place where they do the AA meetings, right? That was there. And we just happened to be in that parking lot. And so this guy walks up and he's got, tattoos under his eyes and up here. And like, he's, very tatted up. And so he just walks up to us, really cool. And he was like, "Are y'all here for the AA?" And we were like, "No." And he was asking us if they had started it yet or something like that. We were like, well, we don't know. We're doing this. And so when we explained what we were doing, he got really interested in it. And so he kind of looked at he was looking at one of my push cards and happened to see the tattoo on my hand, which is, it's very visible. And so he just pointed down and he was like, "You have a tattoo." And he was just like, he was so excited that I was a mayoral candidate with the tattoo that he felt like he wasn't going to get judged by me because he had all these tattoos, and he was just so tired of people judging him, for whatever reason. Obviously people have their own perceptions of what tattoos on the face mean. And so you and I probably can't imagine how he gets perceived, but it was so that was so exciting to him, on top of the fact he was Hispanic as well. And so that was a really unique experience, and one that honestly that's something that sets me apart from the other candidates. I didn't have the best life growing up. I was very much a street kid. I know where these people come from. He told us he was homeless, but he took a T-shirt and a stack of door hangers and said he was going to vote for me and then go block walk for me. So, but I can relate to those folks, and I don't know that there is a candidate in this race that would have even stayed around. They probably would have got in their car and took off. And so I like that. I really like that. And so it was just one of those unique moments, but we've had many of those as we're out everywhere across the city. So
yeah. And I would say there probably hasn't been a candidate in 30 years, if ever, who's ever thought, I'm going to go work with the homeless population. Like, I'm going to go make an effort to reach out to them, or to even have a conversation, when you first make that contact. And so I think that's one of, that's one of the advantages that y'all have, that y'all have been working with these groups that usually get ignored, and not just paying lip service. Like that happens a lot too, where a candidate might talk really big, but then when it comes down to actually spending time in East Lubbock, in North Lubbock, in heart of Lubbock, that, they're not willing to do that. They're willing to speak to it, but they're not going to go there. They're not going to be part of it. They're not, they're not going to put on events in Butler Park like Adam has done a couple of times. And so I think that is just, I think that's going to be really powerful. And I think that's something that is not going to come across in polls. That's not going to come across in, interviews or on social media. But I think y'all are doing really well at that. So Adam, I'll let you answer the last question of what you learned, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So what I've mostly learned, because as far as running a campaign, so this was a big shock to me at first. It's not anymore, but I've been in marketing and those types of fields pretty much my whole career. And so when I started to get into my advocacy work, I was like, oh, this is just marketing. So that's why I was able to have the success I was in my advocacy work. And then I started running a campaign, and I was like, oh, this is just marketing. And so, I didn't really need to learn anything in that way. I was already equipped with pretty much all of the skills that you need to be a successful politician without knowing it. But so that aside, what I did do is fast track learning things I probably would have learned anyway. So I started to sit down with all the different department heads, on a week by week basis. So I knocked out a whole bunch of meetings in a very short amount of time. And so I have this really comprehensive view in my head of how the city operates. Like it's just a part of me now at this point, because I've talked to the water director, like you said, I talked to the solid waste director, and traffic operations director, public works director, city manager, chief financial officer, to really understand in a holistic way how the city operates. And so I've learned a whole lot in that way. The other thing that I learned, that because when I got into advocacy, literally, I didn't come into this, and still don't do my advocacy work. Like I said, probably approaching 50 to 60 hours a week easy in advocacy work before a campaign, by the way.
Right.
I do that without ever, like, not one of those minutes am I expecting to get something back for that. Like, that's not what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it to just try to help and use my skills to try to help as much as I can with whatever the issue may be. And so that's just kind of how I operate. And so I didn't expect or understand how much support I would get from the community, not just people that know me personally, right?
Mhm.
Which is many people that are very influential and all of that, right? I knew of those folks, but the greater community, the support has been so overwhelming because they've been seeing these videos, they've been talking to people that know me on the campaign and things like that. But also, some of these people have been watching Lubbock Compact live for the past 2.5 years, do all of these things that I was involved in. And so, for instance, I got donated, like, completely, like, production and everything, got donated 3 videos that probably by rights should have cost, a few thousand a piece,
Mm-hmm.
and got those donated by people. I've had, I don't even know how many shirts at this point donated. We've had 200 yard signs, 5 big yard signs donated. Like, there's been so much, and that's just, material type stuff. We've had so many people utilizing their networks and their resources behind the scenes, and I don't even know it until, like, somebody just happens to tell me about something and I catch little glimpses of it. But I did not, that's one thing I learned, how much support that I had from people, and it's been really overwhelming and really humbling, and it just really makes me want to win, not for me. I didn't have this ambition, but to win for them, because again, something that people have told me over and over is that they see hope in my campaign, and that's what is driving them to support me so much. And so that part I didn't know. I didn't see that coming. But so I would say those are the big things. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of the reason that people are surprised when that type of thing happened is because most of our leaders for decades have solely focused on advertising. You raise a bunch of money, you get up commercials, that's how you win. And nobody has stopped to think, like, what if I build relationships? What if I do something genuine? What if I go and meet these people? Because while we have had quite a few forums that I don't think have happened in the past, y'all's the strategy y'all are using is very different. And not only does because advertising doesn't build that emotional connection, especially, and that's why I think that's part of the reason the tribalism is so bad. Is because, like, if you focus on advertising, it has to be like, I'm part of your tribe. But if you're part of someone's tribe, you have to exclude somebody. And so that's kind of how I think we get a lot of these dynamics. And so I think that's really cool that y'all are seeing that. And I think, again, I think that's going to be a very productive aspect of what y'all are all doing. That can't be measured until you see the turnout. And so I think that's really exciting and very, very cool. So, well, I appreciate all of y'all being on and having this conversation. I think it was really good. It was really productive. I hope y'all feel that y'all were able to kind of express, yourselves after kind of having a week or two of being told, who you are, that you were able to find that yourself. So yeah, so I appreciate it, everybody. This was a great conversation, and let's hit it hard this week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I love that story about Maurice. I love when Adam tells that story, because representation means so much. It means so many different things. And usually when we mention representation, we mean one of 3 things. We mean race, we mean gender, we mean sexuality. And those are the only 3 things. But representation has more than that. Representation can be a tattoo on the hand. And I kind of think Adam didn't mention that, but I kind of think that was one of the reasons Maurice was really drawn to that, was because you can't hide a tattoo on your hand, and that is who Adam is. And he doesn't. It's not like he wears long sleeves to try to cover it. He embraces who he is fully, and I think we need more people willing to do that. I think to see change, to see better leaders in our area, in our country, we need people who are willing to be wholly themselves. And I hope you saw that today. So we're going to take a break next week. Saturday is election day, and so I think a lot of people are going to be really exhausted. And we tend to record these on Sunday afternoons or evenings. And I don't know that myself or anyone in my circle is going to have the energy or kind of the emotional bandwidth to do that. No matter what happens, like I'm really hopeful. I'm really hopeful for them. Because I don't think you can measure the type of community organizing that they're doing. And so if you're watching this, if you're not in our area, really think about like supporting them. If we see change in Lubbock, we can see change throughout Texas. And I feel like these candidates and Lubbock can bring hope to the rest of the state, because these candidates have been doing it right. Adam has been working in the community for years, and you can't break that trust that he has been able to build. And so consider throwing them $10, $20 if you can. Bethany Luna, Angelina Mojica, Adam Hernandez, Google them, Lubbock, you'll get to them. And I think we could see, if we can see change here in Lubbock during this municipal race, I think that could give people hope across the state. And we could see change happen in November as well. So I really hope you'll consider that. I will see you in a couple of weeks. When we come back, we're going to be talking to people about agriculture. We're going to be talking about reproductive rights. We're going to be talking about education. We have some really great shows and topics coming up that I think are going to be, I think everybody is going to find very interesting, because again, we can make change happen here in Lubbock. We can make it happen across the state. Thank you so much for joining us. I will see you soon.